Quentin Tarantino wins again. New X-ray scanners at airports. Mobile and analog as friends. Xiaomi wants to collaborate. And Wong Kar-wai as Photographer of the Week on this episode of Take's Take.
Thanks so much for tuning in for another episode of Photography Radio. My name is Tomasz and today you are listening to Take's Take with Take Kayo, where he covers what's new and interesting in the world of photography, including digital, analog, mobile, and everything in between. Enjoy.
Can you imagine your life without photography? No? Then you will love this show. And it doesn't matter if you're a DSLR, a mirrorless, or a mobile phone shooter. We're here to help your photography grow. This is Photography Radio.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Take's Take, which is my take on photography news this week. Again, coming to you live from Hong Kong. So let's begin now. The 4th Annual Kodak Film Awards, which celebrates the resurgence of the use of celluloid in the movie industry, awarded Quentin Tarantino with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution to the analog film industry this past week. The Academy Award-winning director, writer, and producer of movies such as Kill Bill, Pulp Fiction, and his most recent flick, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, all 9 of his movies have all been shot using film. Some may think he's an anomaly, but many of Hollywood's biggest names, such as Steven Spielberg and J.J. Abrams, who recently produced the latest Star Wars movie on, you guessed it, Kodak cinematic film, insist on shooting the old-fashioned way, or perhaps it's the new-fashioned way for some, for the very specific way that celluloid renders details and colors. Other industry insiders received awards alongside Tarantino, including Noah Baumbach for Marriage Story, Greta Gerwig for Little Woman, Dan Mindel for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and Rodrigo Prieto for The Irishman. Steve Bellamy, president of Motion Picture and Entertainment for Eastman Kodak, said it was a banner year for film. And this is his quote: "This year, movies shot on film represent 5 of the 10 productions nominated in the Academy's Best Picture and Cinematography categories, and a total of 37 Oscar nominations. This is a great testament to the intrinsic value of film to the motion picture arts. We are excited to celebrate these extraordinary filmmakers at the Kodak Film Awards this year." During a press conference, Kodak also took the opportunity to announce that they've renegotiated deals with 5 of the major movie studios, Disney, NBC Universal, Paramount, Sony, and Warner Brothers, to continue making motion picture celluloid or film for future use. As mentioned previously, many of the biggest names in Hollywood insist on capturing their movies with physical film. Names such as Steven Spielberg, Wes Anderson, Christopher Nolan, J.J. Abrams, Quentin Tarantino, Rian Johnson, and way back in 2014, many of them insisted that they would not shoot movies digitally. So the movie studios negotiated a deal with Kodak in 2015, promising to continue buying it for the foreseeable future. Well, that deal ended a few years ago, and this renewal of this promise by these studios shows the power of these directors, producers, and cinematographers and their commitment to this analog format. 2 big movies for 2020, Nolan's Tenet and Fukunaga's latest James Bond movie, No Time to Die, were both shot on film. If you're a film photographer, this is good news for you too, since many films such as CineStill's 800T, 50D, and XX are all based on movie film. Without these movies being produced with physical film, these cinematic films would not be available. A very strong warning from Kodak concerning the installation of brand new CT scanners for carry-on items at U.S. airports. For years, the warning was always to carry on photographic film since check-in luggage goes through high-powered X-rays that will definitely damage photographic film by causing them to fog. So carrying on film has been the rule for as long as I remember, probably at least the past 20 to 30 years. However, these new CT scanners, Kodak ran some tests using Portra 400, a very normal ISO speed film, typically safe to go through the previous low-powered X-ray scanning devices, but did so from 1 to 10 times through the new CT scanners and reported that even just one scan showed significant fogging, leading to smoky blacks and a loss of shadow details. Kodak used Twitter and Facebook as the main way to communicate this information to customers, this very alarming issue for us film photographers. And Ilford Harman conducted their own tests because of this, using their own black and white films, and found similar results in the UK. Their response on Twitter and their FAQ, frequently asked questions section on their website, says that these new CT scanners are deemed unsafe for any of their films, no matter what ISO speed. Both Kodak and Ilford mentioned that not all airports are using these new CT scanners, and Kodak is currently trying to work with TSA to find a solution. For now, Kodak is planning on making stickers or decals that can be attached onto your film that request security to hand check all photographic film, and I think that's now available at this time. And their Facebook post there's a message from the TSA explaining how to handle carry-on film at their checkpoints that do have these new scanners. And so I'll leave links in the show notes for both Kodak as well as Ilford, and links in the Kodak post on Facebook leads to the information from the TSA. An interesting article on one of the big film photography websites, Emulsive, from contributing writer Christopher Cohen, who actually works for Filmic Inc., the software company that makes the award-winning apps for shooting videos and stills on iPhones, wrote an article on what he calls the symbiotic relationship between mobile and analog photography. Now, in this piece, he basically points out that unlike the competitive relationship between smartphone cameras and traditional digital cameras, mobile photography has helped to introduce film photography to the digital generation. Now, here's an excerpt from one of Cohen's articles. He says, acting as a gateway, mobile photography can offer a taste of film's tonal dynamics and color palette. Enjoying these visual characteristics through simulation on a mobile device may be the most practical entry point for the uninitiated. While it is tempting to view mobile as a supplanter, seeking to take film's mantle by the way of imitation, I would argue that mobile is actually one of the agents of film's revival. A very interesting read, even if you're not a film photographer. And he makes a very good argument of how mobile photography is killing traditional digital cameras, and those are his words, while at the same time helping to make traditional film photography popular again. And so thanks for publishing this article, Emulsive, and I'll leave the links in the show notes. If these types of insights into the world of photography from industry insiders interest you, there's another cool podcast from FujiLove, a little plug there, where they interview David Amell, who is a writer and YouTube host for the very popular brand Android Authority. David and Mark talk about the importance of computational photography in the mobile world and how this technology is slowly and yet surely making its way into more traditional digital cameras. This implementation is truly needed for standalone digital cameras to survive the onslaught of algorithm and computational savvy mobile cameras. Oddly enough, both David and Christopher mentioned in the previous segment, although both heavily into tech and mobile photography and the videography world, both are also avid film photographers as well. So go figure. I'll also leave links for the interview, the podcast with David Amell in the show notes. In odd news this week, Chinese mobile phone manufacturer Xiaomi did an unofficial survey on a Chinese social media platform about who they can collaborate with from the traditional camera world to co-brand a new, perhaps upcoming smartphone camera. This wasn't some low-level employee who did this impromptu post, but it was vice president of the company, Cheng, who recently left Lenovo to work with this smartphone juggernaut. In this survey, Cheng asked which camera manufacturer should they collaborate with, Nikon, Canon, or Hasselblad. Well, guess who won? It was Hasselblad by a landslide, whose current owner just happens to be China's own DJI, those that make the drones. Now, because this was a Chinese survey, it makes sense that most voted for a Chinese-owned company, and I guess the name Hasselblad still has a premium brand appeal in Asia. But those of us who understand camera design and manufacturing know that Hasselblad doesn't really make entire camera systems like companies like Sony or Canon, or even to a certain degree Nikon, as these manufacturers do actually make lenses. Either way, it would be interesting to see if Xiaomi can pull off what Huawei did with Leica and co-brand a smartphone that will appeal to both consumer electronic fans as well as photographers. For Photographer of the Week, again, I wanted to pick a Hong Kong visual artist since I'm still here in Hong Kong and recording live inside Camera Film Photo. I decided to go with a movie director and writer, Wong Kar-wai, even though he isn't technically a photographer. However, like Wes Anderson and Sofia Coppola, if you look at Wong Kar-wai's movie stills, they look like photographs. Wong Kar-wai's movies are often considered art films with mood just oozing off the screen. His best work is filmed in his own city of Hong Kong, but he tends to portray it with the eyes of an outsider. Now, two of my favorite films that he has made are In the Mood for Love and Chungking Express, both critically acclaimed and part of the Criterion Collection, which is a selection of the most important movies of all time. In fact, in a BBC culture survey of 100 greatest foreign language films of all time, 3 of them are from Wong Kar-wai. 2 I've already mentioned, and the other is 1997's Happy Together. Like the other previous movie directors mentioned, Wong works with celluloid, and his best work is shot at night with all the colliding and merging lights of Hong Kong's nightlife. In fact, it was his movie Chungking Express that had inspired me to shoot my first photographic series, Hong Kong Neon, using the same film he used to shoot the movie, which is Kodak's Vision 500T film. In an interview, Wong Kar-wai mentioned that when he first moved to Hong Kong from China, he struggled to speak Cantonese versus his native Mandarin, and so he would often go to the movies as a refuge. Wong said that, quote, "It was something that could be understood beyond words. It was a universal language based on images." Very nice quote. And as a director, he's more of a street than a studio-style cinematographer. He says he hates working off of scripts, often giving his actors rough outlines and asks them to improvise as the movie progresses. He doesn't allow rehearsals and allows the characters to develop while filming. And you can definitely see this in a movie like Chungking Express. So enjoy his films to truly understand his visual work. So there's no need for links to any kind of a show notes. His movie speaks volumes about his ability to see, hear, and tell beautiful stories. And so thanks for listening to this episode of Take's Take, which is my take on photo news this week. Next week, I'll be back in Vancouver, so I say goodbye from Hong Kong. And until then, don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Happy shooting.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Hit subscribe on your podcast app. It would mean a lot for us to have you as our regular listener. Head over to photographyradio.com to drop your suggestion for future editions of Photography Radio, or simply to say hello. We would absolutely love to hear from you. In the meantime, have a wonderful night, and we will be back with more photography in your ears very soon.